My name's Chauncey Sjostedt and I'm a midwife. I've been working as a midwife, well, I'm starting my third year at the moment. I wanted to say thank you to Bridges to Higher Education for having me and to all of you guys for registering to come and hear my talk. So I'm going to be talking today about the journey that I took to become a midwife. And because midwives love telling stories, to help me give you a good picture, I'm going to take you back quite a fair way, 29 years in fact, but it won't go for too long, so don't worry. I'm going to tell you along the way about some of my experiences of working as a midwife, and I will explain to you exactly why I call it baby catching. Now, I've included a couple of mathematical formulas along the way, and they are quite complex, so do bear with me and feel free to ask any questions if you need some help along the way, but I'm fairly certain that you guys are going to be all right. The story I'm going to describe to you is what I like to think of as my unexpected adventure to midwifery, because to be completely honest, I never imagined that I would be working in health, let alone that I would become a midwife. And I guess this story isn't really very different to many that people who have been searching for the right way to go would be. But for me, it's all been about leaps of faith and being a bit brave and just jumping on for the ride. So let's get started. My name's Chauncey Mauva Sjostedt, and I was born April 26, 1984 at a little community hospital in Bulli down in Wollongong. I was my mum's second baby, and she absolutely loved telling me about my birth right from a very young age, which was horrifying to me for a really long time. But now that I'm a midwife, I just can't get enough of it, and I'm full of questions for her. And all of these details up here on the screen that Mum used to tell me about constantly never really meant much until I became a midwife either, but we work with these numbers all the time, and I'm very pleased to know that I was 3,530 grams. It's important information, so that's something to look forward to if you pursue a career in midwifery. Now, I grew up in Wollongong, a very sleepy little city down south. It's a very beautiful place, famous for gorgeous beaches, as you can see there, an incredible escarpment that rolls right the way down along the coast. And one lesser known fact about Wollongong, and something that I always appreciated, were really interesting coffees with very stiff peaks, no bacon, but yeah, didn't really do very well with coffees when I was young back then. So I spent my early years as the youngest child of four spending a lot of time trying to keep up with my older brothers and sisters. There was 5 years in between my sister and I'm sure I drove them completely mad, but in the meantime, when I wasn't annoying them, I developed some interests of my own that I was quite passionate about. So fancy dress being one of them, and climbing the mulberry tree at the back of my house. And I would still say that I am quite passionate about fancy dress still. You need to keep your sense of humour. I did have some pretty great ideas early on about what I thought I might like to be when I grow up. So ballerina being one of them. I was very passionate about dancing. I also thought marine biology might be a pretty cool thing to do. And at one point, I even was trying to convince my parents to let me take up a career in Bollywood, and that one didn't get very far, obviously. Now, I have an early memory which relates to the medical profession, and it was when I was taken as a 5 or 6 year old to get my tetanus needle prior to starting school. And I'm not sure if you remember having that one done, but it is a particularly painful one. Even as an adult, it's awful. And I remember being a little girl on my mum's lap, seeing this needle coming towards me and tensing everything as much as I could because I was horrified. And needless to say, that made the experience all the more painful and incredibly traumatic for me. And I remember so clearly swearing off doctors. They were on my blacklist forever, and was certain at that time that I would never be able to give a needle to anyone. I thought it was just horrible and inhumane, and I did try to avoid needles at all cost for the rest of my life. Didn't do very well at that though. So this brings me to my first formula, and as you can see, it is very sophisticated. So my parents loved telling a story of when I was little, going down to the backyard and discovering that our childhood dog, Hoagie, who loved to play with the little skinks in the backyard, had played a bit too rough one day and bitten one in half. So little 4-year-old me, I think I was at the time, ran upstairs to one of my golden books, grabbed a Band-Aid out of the back, it was a nursing one, went down and tried to put together the two halves using a Band-Aid, which did not work. But the intention was there, and maybe if you use your imagination, that might have been one of those early indications that I might want to one day find myself helping people and in a nurturing role. So I grew up and I attended the local public school in Woonona, where I savoured anything to do with maths, English, painting, drama, dance, and very early on decided that I not only didn't like anything scientific or mathematical, but that I was really bad at it. So I swore off these worthwhile subjects during my schooling career as much as I could, and where I had the choice I would absolutely go for other options. So I guess you could say I felt a bit like a Homer Simpson in these matters, a little bit silly. I continued this bias when I went to high school, and when I had to do the science subjects, I did give it a good go, and I certainly passed, but I didn't pass with those flying colours that I probably could have. Now, although I continued to kind of strive through and dodge those subjects when I could, my second formula was a very important one for me, and it equated to Chauncey plus maths or science equals my brain exploding pretty much. So I did graduate from high school. I graduated with quite a reasonable mark as well, and that was based all on humanities, so I was really proud of myself. But something strange happened in year 12, and when I was considering my choices for university, I applied for something that you guys might not expect, having heard all about my dislike for science subjects. And I went straight for a course called Exercise Science and Rehabilitation. Exercise Science. Now, you might be wondering why I would go for such a thing, and the reason for that is that a couple of years earlier I'd had a really awful knee injury. I dislocated my knee on stage while dancing, and it was exercise science that brought me back from that injury. I just thought it was wonderful, so lovely to be treated by somebody using their hands, very healing and nurturing. And I saw exercise science and rehabilitation in the UAC guide, which is what it was called, and thought that this would get me pretty close and give me a good qualification. But unfortunately for me, it was incredibly heavy on the sciences. Ironically enough, lots of chemistry and biology. But aside from that, the worst part, the absolute pits, were the wet labs. Now, you might be wondering what a wet lab is, and let me tell you, it wasn't my idea of a good time. So a wet lab is a big room full of stainless steel surfaces and human body parts, which really incredible people have donated for the purposes of scientific research. And we would spend hours down there looking at the specifics of human muscles and ligaments and tendons, strong smell of formaldehyde. It was really quite an intense time, and not really my idea of a good time. So at the end of my first semester, I decided that this wasn't the path for me, and looking back now, I can see how it definitely was a step in the right direction. I was heading towards something where I would be working with humans, but it just wasn't the right time. So off I went to Sydney University, where I enrolled in a Bachelor of Arts, and fell in love with something called anthropology. For me, this was a really exciting time because I moved to the city, and this degree was all about expanding my mind, thinking about things in a new way, falling in love with research and writing. And anthropology is all about learning how incredible humans are, the amazing things that we do with our world, with our minds and our social arrangements. And we got to look at really interesting tribes from Papua New Guinea, ritual and festivity in Brazil. That degree really took me all over the world through the books that we were looking at. But when it came to the end of that degree, I absolutely couldn't think of a career that I wanted to pursue using anthropology. So I packed my bags and I went off on an incredible adventure. I trekked myself all over Europe and it was an amazing time, really just had the best time. And I returned home and I started working in hospitality, worked my way up to a management level and really quickly started feeling quite unfulfilled by what I was doing. I knew I wanted to play a more meaningful role in people's lives and I just wasn't exactly sure how to do that. And it was at that time that midwifery called out to me. So about a year after returning, I was sitting down with a dear old friend, a very wise woman, and was explaining to her that I'd decided I wanted to think about teaching, and both my parents were teachers, seemed like a logical choice. And she suggested that maybe I might like to do something a little bit different and think about becoming a midwife. And I thought she had bricks in her head. I thought that was just absolutely crazy. Didn't ever imagine that I would be able to work with, you know, gore and blood and in such a real way. But I had midwifery all wrong at that point. I didn't really know anything about it. And funnily enough, I went off and after a couple of days, midwifery was really all I could think about. It just seemed to fit so well with me. I always have been really passionate about health promotion, giving people the tools to be able to empower themselves to do incredible things, and childbirth really is an incredible thing. And soon enough, I was completely committed and was trawling the internet for ways that I could possibly become a midwife. Now, I knew I didn't want to become a nurse first, so it was important to me to find a direct entry midwifery course. And I found one at UTS, which was wonderful. So it would be 3 years, purely midwifery study, and I thought that was great. So because it had been a little while since I left school, I was considered a mature age student at the age of 24. So what I had to do was write a personal statement, and I needed to convince a panel of midwives and lecturers that I was worthy for a spot in this course. And this course only takes a certain number of students because there are limited spaces at the hospitals where you do your placements, and it's really highly competitive. So I needed to think long and hard about what I was going to write and how I was going to sell myself, and I put a lot of work into it. And I wrote a personal statement that I was really proud of in the end, and I got a position, which was just the most thrilling thing. So, what exactly is a midwife? Because although I'd convinced myself that I wanted to become one, and I'm very glad I did, I don't think I really knew, and I started to learn a lot when I began my studies. So midwife literally translates to with women, and that's exactly what we do. We spend a lot of time with women, helping them prepare for their labour and birth, talking to them about their concerns, making sure they're medically well and that their baby's growing well. We spend a lot of time with them in labour and birth, often just as a silent presence, ensuring that everything's okay. We spend a lot of time with them after their baby's been born as well. This is a definition of a midwife, and it's an international definition. So you need to have completed a training program, and this is based on international standards. So you become part of a global community when you become a midwife. Now, midwives consider ourselves the guardians of natural birth, and the way in which we ensure this is by really having an appreciation for the fact that we're in a very privileged position. Having a baby is an enormous life process to go through, and I myself feel incredibly honoured to be a part of that role. While our role is predominantly to provide medical care for that woman and her baby, there's also important other elements as well. And I believe, as well as a lot of other midwives, that ensuring that woman's emotional and psychological well-being is really important, because we know that that's directly linked to the health of the woman and to the health of her baby and their significant others as well. Now, before starting midwifery, I had no idea what active birth meant or oxytocin, but these two words get used a lot. They're incredible words, and they really mean a lot to me and to the women I take care of. And now all of my friends and family are really well versed in these concepts. When I started my degree, and even now, if you get me talking about midwifery, I'll be off and going for a really long time. Sometimes inappropriately. There's been some tricky conversations at dinner parties where maybe people have asked me in too much detail about midwifery, but I am the only midwife in my circle of friends and have a good novelty value for that, and I do love talking. People are so interested to learn about exactly what midwifery entails. So you might be wondering exactly what it's like to study midwifery, and in a word, I would describe it as incredible. The people who teach us are amazing, incredible men and women who are passionate about midwifery. The content of those lectures is unbelievable and like nothing I'd ever heard before. Great discussion and debate, particularly in my year. We were all incredibly passionate and outspoken, and a whole heap of new information to absorb. The course at UTS sends you out into the field in the very first semester, and that's really important because you want to get a bit of a taste for exactly what it's going to be like to be a midwife. So you're under no illusions as to what it's going to be like out there. And I remember my first day at the hospital so clearly. I don't think I slept a wink that night. I was just so nervous that I was going to miss my alarm or something would happen. And finally it was time to get out of bed at 5:30, and it was dark outside still, and managed to have some breakfast in the midst of all of my nerves. And I got in the car and I drove to the hospital. My first shift was in the birthing unit. And within moments of arriving, I was invited into a room. The couple were happy to have me there, and I witnessed my first birth. And it was beyond words, just phenomenal. University had prepared us really well for that. We'd seen some videos and we had enough knowledge that it wasn't going to be too much of a disarming experience. And I was really lucky. So on my first day, I actually witnessed 4 births, which is quite unheard of. Some students have to wait for a long time. So I was definitely feeling as though I was on the right path. But one thing that happened is I cried, and I was just so overwhelmed by the emotion. The goosebumps rolled over me, and to be honest, every single time I see a birth, I have a strong emotional response. It really never loses its uniqueness and its beauty. So what is it like to work in a hospital and to be studying there? And I'd be lying if I said that hospitals weren't a bit of a weird place. I think for a lot of us, we don't spend a lot of time there, and they are a little bit strange, and it does take a little bit of getting used to, but you certainly get there. And I would say that a lot of your student life is spent not only practicing your skills within the hospital, but learning the order of things and understanding how it all works. I was scared to death of doing something wrong, I think was the main thing for me. And I think also that probably made me a really diligent student midwife, a little bit nerdy, if you will. So no 2 days are ever the same at a hospital, and that would be the same no matter where you were working within that unit. But certainly in midwifery, there is just no predicting what's going to happen and who will come through that door, and it's incredibly exciting for that reason. Now, you spend a lot of time at the hospital completing what they call follow-through experiences. And this is a really, really valuable learning tool. So when I was studying, I had to recruit 20 women and ask them if they were happy for me and for their significant others if they were happy for me to accompany them through their childbirth experience. So I would attend their appointments during the pregnancy. We call that antenatal appointments. I'd be on call for their labours and birth and follow them up after the baby had been born. And there's a certain number of hours that you need to that you need to make up for each one of those women. Now, asking the first one if I was able to join with them was incredibly nerve-wracking, and they told us at uni that it would be like asking someone out on a date, and it actually was. It was really, really nerve-wracking, but by the end you're just selling yourself and asking, and you become really used to it. And they're incredibly valuable learning experiences. What you're doing with that is embodying a really core midwifery concept, and that is called continuity of care. And what it involves is that family having the same midwife or the same two midwives, sometimes the same four, but a known carer throughout their childbearing period. And what it has shown to benefit is not only the woman and her significant other's satisfaction, but also the birth outcomes as well, which is a really, really important factor. Now, I'm sure you're getting the impression that there's a lot of things happening when you're studying at university, and you're right, there's lots of different balls in the air. So from your assessments and your exams to even just being at uni and absorbing the information and enjoying your learning, doing your follow-throughs and your prac. So it's a juggling act. It can be really quite challenging at times, and it's all about being planned, keeping your diary up to date, being really disciplined with yourself. And I think it's really important to maintain a good balance between your study and your work and your personal life. So for me, I kept on going to yoga. I would see my friends and my family as much as I could, and just make time to kind of slob out and watch a movie so that it didn't all get too much. Midwifery is an amazing degree because when you start, you meet a bunch of classmates and you stay with them the whole time, and you become incredibly close. So we had 50 wonderful women, and it was all women that I studied with in my particular year, but there are male midwives as well. 50 women, and we became incredibly close. So lots of late night phone calls when we had big exams in, lots of sharing of resources and support, some wild weekends away as well, and it's a really amazing part of the degree. So midwifery is a really highly competitive course to gain entry to, and if you're thinking about becoming a midwife and you gain entry immediately, then well done. You know, it's really amazing, and if you're interested in it, then I give you my full encouragement to continue on with that as a degree. But if you don't make it in the first time, there are other ways to go, and it might require a bit of perseverance, but if you're passionate and if it's your absolute wish, then it will be worth it in the long run. So there's a few different paths to take. I mentioned that I didn't necessarily want to become a nurse, but you certainly can do a nursing degree first and then do an extra year specialising in midwifery. You can perhaps apply in a different state where the mark is lower. UTS does require quite a high mark. And there are ways to transfer between degrees as well. So if you don't make it in first, then all hope isn't lost. Now, why is midwifery wonderful? And the reasons are far too many for me to describe, but just a few reasons in the time that we have. You may have noticed that some of my slides, the ones that have worked, I do apologise, have had midwives working in all sorts of incredible environments, and it definitely is something that you can use to travel and see the world with. I've been fortunate enough to work with incredible women from all walks of life, and I would say that that's one of the incredible aspects to the job, just the texture that it allows you, all of the different options. Working as a midwife is quite a flexible role, and there are lots of different ways in which you can apply your midwifery skills and specialise further. So you can become something called a lactation consultant, which is a woman who knows a lot about, or a midwife, sorry, who knows a lot about breastfeeding and the process of lactation and can really help women adjust to breastfeeding their new baby. You can help women have babies at home, become a home birth midwife. You can work in rural settings out there in Australia, and there are so many options for ways in which you can work. But for me, the best part of midwifery is this, exactly what you can see on the slide there, and it's just being with women, being invited into their lives at this incredible moment and really making a difference for them. No words can describe the joy that this has brought for me in the past and will continue to bring throughout my career. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I've been doing as a midwife, and I was fortunate enough to work as an on-call midwife for a couple of years at a birth centre. And I would meet women at 13 weeks into their pregnancy. And during these antenatal appointments, these appointments during pregnancy, I'd be checking up on the health of the woman and her baby, ordering the necessary tests, talking about their problems, providing extra support, and getting different teams involved if that woman had complex needs. Because all of my women had my phone number on my days on, they could contact me during their pregnancy if there were any emergencies. So I had a couple of times where a woman might have had a fall and she would come in and we'd make sure the baby was okay, do the necessary blood tests and provide her support. And the beautiful thing about those women being able to call me as their known midwife or my buddy on her days on was that they had that familiar face and they were always happy to see you, very comforted by your presence. So labour and birth was a very important part of what I was doing, and I got into the habit of having my phone in my pocket all the time and next to my bed when I was sleeping on my days on, and I would get calls in the middle of the night to go and attend labours and births. I'd jump out of bed and throw on my clothes like a super midwife and whiz down the highway, arrive to a very dark and quiet hospital and greet a couple who were in labour. And it didn't matter what time of night, you were so excited because you knew them. You'd been waiting for this day and working towards it for a very long time. Once in the hospital, we'd spend nice long hours getting in and out of the birthing pool, sitting and listening, making suggestions, making sure the couple were safe and helping everything to go well. My friends got really used to me having my phone in my pocket and really found it exciting when every now and then I'd be called away from a dinner party to go and attend a birth. It was really wonderful. So baby's born safely, but the midwife job is not done. Now, midwives are very passionate about helping to support women to breastfeed their baby if the woman wants to and if it's possible. And once the baby's been born, a really crucial part of our role is helping that to happen. And very important for that woman and the baby to have a bit of time to get to know one another. So we allow that space, and then we help the process to move along smoothly. So we talk about the benefits of breastfeeding during the pregnancy and let that couple and her significant other know that breastfeeding leads to fewer health problems in later life, better bonding between the mother and baby, and a real perk that it helps that mother lose the weight that she may have put on during pregnancy, which is always a bit of a exciting fact. And yeah, really help to support and encourage that process. But it doesn't stop there. We would get out into the community and go and visit women and their babies at home. So unfortunately not on a bike, that would be pretty cool, but we'd jump in the car and be lucky enough to go and visit women and babies at home who you'd shared that incredibly important moment with. So giving them support, making sure they were adapting well, helping with breastfeeding if necessary at all, and drinking lots of tea and eating lots of biscuits, which were quite difficult to avoid, but really, really lovely. All right. Now, this is one of our favourite slogans. Midwives have got some pretty good slogans out there, but this is a really special one, and it's true. It can be quite daunting to think that the future is in your hands as you're working as a midwife. You want to make sure that you're practicing to the very best of your ability, that all of those processes that you've drilled at university are still there with you, and you're really up to speed. I really like about the job that it requires me to be absorbing the best new evidence and research and keeping up to date. You can't get stale as a midwife because the future is in your hands. You've just got to keep on moving with the times. So attending conferences and seminars and making sure I'm really on the ball is great. Now, I really wanted a job that challenged me, and if you're considering this as a career, you have my utmost respect, and I really do encourage you to do it. Although it was a heavy science subject, a heavy science degree, because I really wanted this, all of those challenges seemed really insignificant to me. I was so motivated to become a baby catcher, and I just ploughed through no matter what it took. I actually have a box filled of beautiful little handmade cards like this that women and their families have given me, and if ever I need a pick up, I can have a look through that box, and it always really cheers me up. Now, I promised I'd tell you what a baby catcher is, and here it is. So some of us out there like to call it baby catching or birthing a woman rather than delivering a baby. And for me, unlike pizzas which get delivered, this phrase baby catching indicates that it's the woman who's in control, doing all of the work, which she is, and I'm just really there to make sure all is well and to provide her support. And often, actually, really quite literally just catching that baby. It's that woman's birth, not mine and her significant others. And that is a really humbling position to be in. So that's why I call it catching a baby. Now, I've just got a couple of resources here if you're interested. The first one is a really interesting documentary made in Australia about childbirth. Goes into some of the political issues around it, and yeah, Noni Hazelhurst is in it from Play School. Next one is the Australian Breastfeeding Association website. It's got some good information there for you as well. UTS midwifery page, if you're wanting to have a bit of a think about that. And the last one's a book. You may have seen the TV series called The Midwife, but this is the original book, and it's good reading material in between your study. So that's the end of my time. Thanks so much for listening. Does anybody have any questions at all? Okay, that's a great question. So all of the science is, well, a lot of the science-based subjects are really directed towards midwifery. So looking at specific health problems that might occur along the way, drug administration, those sorts of things. But there are some subjects like pharmacology, pathophysiology and anthropology, which you do along with other nursing students. So you definitely can see the benefit of those subjects to your course. And I think 3 or 4 subjects. They've changed the course a little bit since I was there, but yeah, they make it really accessible. There's always extra study that you can do, and what we would do would form little study groups and help each other get the practice quizzes when we could, and just really made sure that we were on the ball. We'd had a good coffee before the lecture started, and we were really listening and paying attention. Yeah, so not overly so, but it is certainly an important component. And I passed, so that's definitely saying something.
Thank you.